Hey Marshall, welcome to Japan, brother.
It's always interesting to see a developer step outside of their comfort zone and create a game that differs from their usual offerings. It can result in interesting new interpretations of how a game in a specific genre should be created, usually coming from a place of genuine passion when a developer comes up with a cool idea that could work for a specific genre and really wants to make it a reality. Sometimes you'll get something inspired but awkwardly executed, but at other times you'll get something surprisingly great, like Binary Domain. Though the developers behind the Yakuza series at Sega aren't known for doing much outside of that, they took a shot at creating a completely new IP in a new genre in 2012, the same year they released Yakuza 5. Binary Domain is a sci-fi third-person shooter based around voice-commanded squad-based combat against hordes of relentless robotic enemies. It's a big departure from the open-world beat-em-ups they're known for, which is why I'm impressed that it turned out so well. Well, they did make a shooter of sorts previously in the form of Yakuza Dead Souls, but that was sort of all over the place and probably taught them a lot about what not to do when making Binary Domain. It's interesting to think about the fact that the Yakuza developers actually make a ton of games in a ton of different genres, they're just all included in a single package known as Yakuza. A squad-based third-person shooter is a premise that could have ended up flatlining in the hands of another developer, but thankfully the game retains the sense of personality that these developers are known for. The game has a really great setting and its characters are very likable, and because of that you care more about its team mechanics and the events of its story. It feels like a bunch of people got together and really wanted to make a game with the feeling of a fun western action movie but set in a sci-fi anime setting. And because of that, it has all of the right kind of cheese to make it charming and all of the right intrigue to make its setting come alive. The game takes place in 2080 and the world has changed quite a bit due to rising water levels threatening life on the planet. To survive, mankind built upwards on the back of advanced robotics. Now, robots are commonplace in all aspects of life, and with that came the necessity for new laws to regulate them. All of the world's major nations came together to sign the New Geneva Convention, which among other things banned the creation of robots that mimicked humans. These are referred to as hollow children, and recently one has shown up, shocking the world. These highly advanced robots look and believe they're human, living normal lives among us until the illusion is shattered and they become killing machines. Intel suggests these machines are coming from the now isolationist country of Japan, and a coalition team is formed to infiltrate the city and expose their violations. This team, whose members specialize in counter-robotics operations, is known as a Rust Crew and is made up of soldiers from the US, UK, China, and France. You play as Dan Marshall, also known as the Survivor, who alongside his best friend Big Bo make an explosive entry into the city, ensuring every robot in Japan is out to get them. Once they meet up with the other Rust Crew members they're assigned with, the game really begins, and from there it's one long journey from the slums of the city to the hub of technological advancement. The setting is done really well, and its grimy, sleazy underbelly has a lot of texture to it, making it feel like a good old-school sci-fi anime. And like a good sci-fi anime, a lot of the reason you're invested in it is for the sense of adventure and detailed exploration of a future riddled with societal problems. You really get a sense of the disparity between the classes as you move through the game, and this is reinforced by the city's design itself, with the slums being made up of people and structures who are left behind to drown as the city built upwards to safety. In just a single city, they managed to squeeze out a lot of variety in the levels by starting with rundown ruins and moving up to bright and glossy futuristic skyscrapers. This gives you a great sense of awe and discovery too, as the contrast in setting and lifestyle of its civilians is a surprising change after spending so much time running around in the dirt. But in this city, you'll be running into more robots than people as the Japanese government tries to stop your team using all of the forces at their disposal. Combat against these mechanized soldiers is actually very enjoyable because of their crunchy, destructible nature. As you blast them away, pieces of them will go flying all over the place, and you can even blow off their various limbs, changing the way they fight. For example, they'll drop their gun and have to pick it back up if you take out the arm they're shooting with, or they'll switch to their sidearm. They'll begin crawling and shooting from the ground if you take out their legs, and even grab onto you if they get close. If you take out their heads, they'll even begin attacking their own allies. The game goes above and beyond to take advantage of what makes robots unique to fight, and really brings that to life. These are calculating death machines. They don't flinch when you shoot them, they march on unwavering as you blast hot metal into their rusted faces. The game sort of forms the counterweight to Vanquish's more goofy take on robots. While you were fighting robots in that game, there was nothing really robotic about the way they acted aside from being susceptible to the IR signature from your cigarettes, which could be used as a diversion. They even danced around and had fun. Binary Domain, on the other hand, is very grounded, and the robots feel like lifeless metal killing machines which would have no reason to have emotions. and that's not to say they don't have fun with the designs of these guys. They get pretty inventive with special types of robots and boss fights as the game goes on, and if you played this game on PS3 like I did in the past, you'll know they didn't scale back their ambitions at all when designing these things, leaving the frame rate in ruins at some points on consoles. There's even a French robot on your team named Kane that's one of the most likable characters in gaming.
Ice front! Ice front!
You can look now. We made it.
Chance of collision was only 62%.
Holy.
There's an interesting dynamic in the game that deals with what it means to be alive, where the enemy robots are presented as inhuman, but Kane is comedic and sympathetic along with the Hollow children, which are pitiable, though in the end, still not human. This is probably the closest we'll ever get to a modern-day Snatcher game, though instead of being straight-up body snatchers, the Hollow children are naive and confused until activated. The game understands that it can deal with dramatic topics, but still needs to have some levity, and thankfully the game gets very comedic at times. Things get serious, but the characters always stay optimistic and throw around jokes constantly. The voice acting in the game is very cheesy too. In the Japanese version, everyone was speaking Japanese, but in our version, everyone is putting on fake accents. We have Troy Baker pretending to be British, Laura Bailey doing some kind of non-specific foreign accent that's supposed to be Chinese, Johnny Young Bosch pretending to have a really bad Japanese accent, and even your character Dan is voiced by Knuckles pretending to be human.
Come on, Bo, you know the only movies you watch are porn. Oh, yeah, right, with the... yeah. Hey, watch this.
I think it would have been really interesting if they tried pulling something off like Siren Blood Curse did. In that game, there were a mix of characters from America and Japan, but they were actually voiced by American and Japanese actors. So you got to hear English speakers try to speak Japanese, and Japanese characters speak in authentic Japanese and speak rough English. It was something that really added to the authenticity of the setting, and I think it would have been really cool if the actors behind these characters all spoke their respective languages to really bring out the multinational element of their unit. There are these two Japanese police officers that chase you throughout the game, and when they're talking to one another, they speak Japanese unchanged from the original Japanese release, and it just seems out of place compared to everyone else, especially when one of them changes voice actors to speak English later on. This isn't a negative as much as it is a missed opportunity in my opinion. I mean, this is from the same team as Yakuza, a series that hasn't had an English dub since the very first game, so I'm used to playing their games with subtitles and hearing foreign languages, and this would have been the next level of that. It definitely would have been something worth commending the game for instead of grabbing a few standard American voice actors out of a hat and casting them like they did. Not to say they didn't do a good job, because they did, I'm just saying that extra bit of effort would have really elevated the game in my eyes, but hey, the dub is what gives the game that corny, classic sci-fi anime feel, so maybe it's for the best. As you play through the levels, you get to choose which teammates you want to stick by your side, and this affects which characters will be with you during certain events, and will result in different dialogue sequences that flesh out the characters, and even unique banter between the two you brought with you. This also gives you the chance to raise the trust levels of your squad mates by responding to what they say in ways they like.
Yo, Dan, how about we let off a shot? Probably scare him shitless. You didn't think I was serious, did you? Shit, when I retire, I want me some of this. Big time.
Basically, this is a third-person shooter with social links, and earning the trust of all your teammates is key to getting the best ending in the game. Their affinity can also fluctuate during combat depending on how good you're doing or if you're accidentally shooting them. This can be kind of annoying sometimes because no matter how hard you try not to shoot anyone, there will inevitably be a moment where one of your teammates comes out of nowhere from your side and gets right into your line of fire. Even though the game has voice command options, they aren't mandatory at all. You can still respond to the things characters say with a little drop-down menu, and you can give them instructions on how you want them to fight in the same way. It might be a little more immersive if you're triggering these inputs with your voice, but really I enjoy playing the game without voice commands and haven't had any problems. I haven't played the whole game with voice commands because it isn't a feature that interests me that much, but I have given it a try because I know for some of you this will be the thing that makes you the most curious about the game. It isn't like this is Lifeline on PS2, so don't expect to control every minute action your partners perform through voice commands, or for there to be a ton of hidden phrases you can say to trigger unique responses from characters. I mean, you can call their names and start weirding everyone out by coming onto them, but aside from that, you're giving pretty standard commands like charge and retreat. The thing is, there really isn't that much reason to use voice commands in the first place. Now this may change on higher difficulties, but on normal, you really don't have to worry about telling your teammates what to do. I find that it's much easier to take fighting into your own hands and impress your teammates, raising your trust with them. I was impressed with how noticeably your commands affected the behavior of your squad though. When you tell them to charge, they'll go running out to overpower enemies if the situation permits it. The likelihood that they'll stick their neck out for you and charge into dangerous situations is also dependent on how much they trust your leadership. It was really cool being able to direct teammates with just my voice, leaving my hands free to continue playing the game just as normal. That's probably why I never used the commands much in my several playthroughs. It was much easier to default into a normal shooter routine rather than remember I could stop and press a button to command my allies around. One of these days I'll need to do an all-voice command run just to see how much the experience changes. I think it's a feature that you could get a lot out of if you put the time into mastering it, but even those who aren't interested in it can still have fun with the game as it isn't forced on you at all. With the trust system, I feel like there just isn't enough of the game for it to be fully realized. It starts strong at the beginning where it's just a bunch of running around the city fighting robots, but as the game goes on, they start switching things up by introducing new characters who you of course want to earn trust with immediately to get them on the same level as your other partners. Then there's this big chunk of the game where you and two characters get separated from the rest of the group, and that element of choosing who you want to team up with is lost. So if you are already playing with those two characters as your partners right before this, not knowing a section like this existed, it can feel like you've been stuck with the same two characters for half the game, and you have even less time to play alongside those other characters before the credits roll. Once you meet back up with them, there's really no time to raise their trust up to max before the end of the game if you didn't do it already before this huge chunk where you had no contact with them. Point being, if the game had one more big chapter where you got to run around with everyone in your squad like in the beginning, the trust system would have more room to breathe and it wouldn't seem like your interactions with it were front-loaded to the first half. I guess that's what replays are for, and this is really only a complaint for me because I really like this aspect of the game and wanted more of it. As a third-person shooter alone, the game is pretty standard. The shooting works really well, you can throw grenades, use a melee attack, hide behind cover. It's all very standard stuff you'd expect in a third-person shooter. But it's everything surrounding those basic mechanics that make the game stand out. It's the concept of the world and the situations you're put in against these robots. It's the look and style of the game and the characters that are actually really likable. It's all this stuff alongside its trust system and squad mechanics that give it its own identity and make it a game worth suggesting. Of course it has its flaws and missed potential, but it still gets a recommendation from me. Running around this futuristic city being chased by killer robots with this endearing bunch of soldiers was a hell of a fun ride, and I think you'll enjoy it a lot too, especially if you've liked the other games I've covered in this series. I'd be really happy to see these developers tackle a sequel to this game or even create another new franchise, because they've shown they're more than capable of pulling it off. It's also really fresh to play a game from these guys that's completely original and doesn't have any kind of recycled animations and assets. Wait a second, I recognize that anime babe. Thank you all for watching everyone, and see you all next time.